such as some kind of like crowdfunding or a new digital fabrications technologies. In that case, directly it influence the engineering designs and the product development practices. So although they are a essential part of the product development, the terms prototype and prototyping. So sometimes we may call it as a prototype, sometimes we may call it as a prototyping, but do not have a commonly accepted definitions. And it refers to a range of some kind of artifacts and some processes that have the different meanings or different purposes, or even both have the different characteristics. So the prototype and prototyping are the two terms are often used in the same context. But whenever we are talking about that prototyping, in that cases, the general definition is often accepted that the term prototype designates the representative form of an idea. That's we may call it as a prototype. So the prototype is a designates a we may say it's a representative form of an idea. But whereas in the prototyping, it's referred as an activity of making and utilizing the prototypes in design. So that's in some context the differences between the prototype and prototyping. Maybe I call it like that. So with a short introduction, just start my session. Are you able to see the second slide, the table of contents?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So actually today next 1 hour we are going to discuss about the introduction about the prototype and what about the remarkable reasons for using the prototyping, and what are the different types of prototyping, under that low fidelity and high fidelity prototyping. What are the 8 common methods and best practices to be followed while using prototyping, and what is the prototype development, and what are the different categories of prototype development, and what are the importance of prototype development, and what are the different phases, and finally conclude the session with the final thought. So this is the overview of today's sessions. So here, whenever the prototyping is we may call it as an experimental process where the design teams that implement the ideas into the tangible forms from the paper to digital. So here, the team build the prototype of varying the degrees of fidelity to capture the design concept and test on the users. So with the prototypes, you can define and validate your designs to your brand, and that can release the right product in the right time, like that. That's a very important thing. Normally, whenever we talk about that product development, the verification and validation is very important whenever we go for doing some kind of software development. So in that cases, with the help of the prototype, easily we can validate our idea. So that's a very important stage in that prototyping. So here, actually, based on the famous quote is given by Tim Brown. Actually, he's the CEO and president of IDEO. Here, they slow us down to speed us up by taking the time to prototype our ideas. So that's why in that cases we avoid costly mistakes such as becoming too complex, too early, and sticking with the weak idea for too long. So that's why here, based on this quote, we may actually come to know that prototype is very, very important during the during the idea generations. So that's a thing. So next, actually, whenever we talk about the prototype, here the effective product development, the process cannot exist without prototyping. So it's uncommon for entrepreneurs or any product managers to assume they are entirely separate disciplines. But in practice, there is always an element of prototyping that are involved in any design undertaking. So that's why the prototype can take the many forms depending on the context. But in general, we define a prototype as any preliminary model, or it may be call it as any representation of a concept. So if that actually that sound vague, it's because they can take on many different forms. For example, we may take the example for the web page. So the prototype of a web page might be a series of images that stitched together in a PowerPoint slide. So whereas a prototype of a cell phone, that cell phone case, suppose take the example of cell phone case. So in that cell phone case might be a two scale with that model produced by a 3D printer for the testing purpose and other things. So that's why whether we are designing the services or any kind of app or any physical product or any strategy, it may be a process or it may be a product or anything. So in that case, the prototype continuously serves as an invaluable tool for the testing and improving upon the design concept. So another common misconception is that the prototype is a fixed step in the design process. So, but in reality, it's not a gate that a product must pass through the period to the final productions, but rather a recurring activity in the product development cycle. So that's a very important thing. That's why normally we may say that the prototyping is a fixed step, but it's not like that. It's a trial and error based on whatever what the product we need. Based on that, it keep on changing the things. That's why it's not a the prototyping. It's not a fixed step. A fixed step. It's a normally we may say it's a commonly we say it's a fixed, but it's not like that. So based on the idea, based on the outcome of our product, it can be changed. So that's the thing. So next, what are the remarkable reasons for prototyping? See, whenever actually in that cases, we know normally the prototyping is a fourth phase of both the design thinking and the design sprints. So in that case, the prototyping is an essential part of the user experience design UX. That it usually comes after the ideation phase or after idea generation. So where your team have created and selected ideas that can solve the user's needs and like that. So that's why in prototyping, you grab a simple experimental model of your proposed product so that so you can check how well it matches what users want through the feedback they give like that. So in that case, you should consider the prototyping from early on using a paper prototyping. So we'll see in the upcoming slides different types of prototyping. So one important prototyping is the paper prototyping. So if appropriate, so the feedback you gather from the users can help the guide the development of like that. So in that case, the advantages of prototype. What's the remarkable reason for using prototype in the first point? We may say have a solid foundation from which to ideate towards the improvements. So in that case, giving all the stakeholders a clear picture of the potential benefits, risk and cost associated with where the prototype might lead. So second one, it can adopt the changes yearly, so thereby avoiding the commitment to a single or a falsely ideal version, the getting stuck on the local maxima of the UX or some kind of the later incurring the heavy cost due to the oversights or some other thing. So that's why with the help of the prototype, some kind of adoption can be taken in a very easy manner in the early manner. So that's another advantages. And next thing, we actually it's a very important thing to show the prototype to your users. So in that case, so the users can give you the feedback to help the pinpoint which element or which variant that work the best and whether the any updation to be required or like that. So that's another thing, another advantage. And next advantage is have a tool to experiment with the associated part of the user's needs and problem. So therefore, you can get the insights and into the less obvious areas of the user's world. Example, you notice them using it for an additional purposes or as some kind of issues such as challenges to mobile use or whatever it may be. So that's also another advantages. And next, it provides a sense of ownership to all the concerned stakeholders. So therefore, fostering emotional investment in the product's ultimate success. And finally, it improves the time-to-time market by minimizing the number of errors to correct before product releases. So these are the advantages of prototyping. These are the reason for using the prototype. So that's the thing. So very important. Whenever we talk about that prototyping, the prototype is a fourth important phase in the design thinking phase, the design thinking process. So that's the thing. And next, another important thing, see how early prototyping prevent the costly errors in advance. In the sense here, actually they are applying the 110-100 rule. So this figure actually illustrate the $1 prevention cost, $10 correction cost, and $100 failure cost. so which has proven true for the quality that cost and state that $1 properly spent in defect preventions. So that's $1 perfectly spent in the defect prevention, that is equal to the $100 spent in the product appraisals, and sorry, $10. See, the $1 properly spent in defect prevention, and it's equal to the $100 in spent in the product appraisal, and then $10. $100 is spent on the product failures. So that's the thing. 110 rule. So the $1 for properly spent in the defect prevention is equal to the $10 for spending the product appraisals. That's the correction cost, and that's equal to the that finally we are getting a $100 spent on the product failures, like that. So that's why the prototyping can help the catch potentially the costly errors well in advance, like that. So that's why that's a very another important advantage, we may say, how that prototyping early prevents the errors, the costly errors. So that's based on 110 rules. So the $1 spending of the defect prevention is equal to the $10 spent in the product appraisal. That's equal to the 100 spent on the product failures, like that. So that's the thing. And next we go with the different types, that the low fidelity and high fidelity prototyping. So before to go to that, fidelity means the fidelity is nothing but it refers to the level of detail and functionality you include in our prototype. So that usually it depends on the your product development stages only. So in that cases, you can construct one that gives a wide the view of the entire system or subsystem. That's called as a horizontal prototype. So the example, we may say the entire website. So whenever we are talking about the website, the entire website is called as a horizontal prototype. And another one, it gives a detailed view of just one feature. That's called as a vertical prototype. That's nothing but any one process. It may be checkout process, or it may be like that. So that's the thing. So the horizontal prototype and vertical prototype is very important whenever we are focusing about the prototype. A horizontal prototype is nothing but it's a view of the entire system or subsystem. Example, we may call it as a entire website. But the vertical prototype is nothing but it's a detailed view of just one what are the features or one module or like that. For example, any checkout process, any one process, so single process or single module or like that. So that's why here the level of fidelity you choose should be appropriate for your presenting the users in user testing, so that they can give the focused feedback. So, for example, in the low fidelity, for example, that's the horizontal vertical prototyping. The low fidelity prototypes is used by the designer in the early stage of the project to make sure the content is correct or not. So that's a low fidelity. So the already told about the fidelity is nothing but level of detail and functionalities you include in our prototypes in our prototype. The low fidelity is nothing but it's used by the designer in the early stage of the system that make sure the content is correct or not. So the example, we may say call it as a paper prototype. So the paper prototype actually the advantage and disadvantage of paper prototype are like the low fidelity is nothing but the process is nothing but we make call it it's a fast and cheap. It's a disposable and easy to make the changes and new iterations and allow the quick overall view of the product, and anyone can produce them. And so these are the advantages of low fidelity. So disadvantages of low fidelity is nothing but sometime it may be actually it's a lack of realism, and so the users might have a hard time giving the feedback. That's a thing. And another thing, it's hard to apply the results from the crude early versions, and it may be too basic to reflect the user's experience of the finished product. And another disadvantage of low fidelity, it can oversimplify the complex issues. And another thing, it's a lack of interactivity would deprive the users of the direct control and like that. So these are some of the disadvantages and advantages of low fidelity system. And the next, high fidelity. The high fidelity prototypes are created at the later stage. Actually, that is the low fidelity to create it in the early stage of the system, but the high fidelity created the later stage of the system design process to test all the current hypotheses. So whatever assumptions or whatever conditions given by the users or end users or whoever it may be, So that everything will be actually created in that high fidelity itself. So the example is some kind of digital prototype that created on the software, such as it may be a Sketch or Adobe Xperia or whatever it may be. So actually it's about the high fidelity. So the advantages and disadvantages of high fidelity is nothing but the first the advantages is nothing but all the way it's engaging. So how it engaging in the sense here all the stakeholders have the vision realized in their hands. They can judge how well it matches users and needs and solve their problem like that. So that's a very important advantage of high fidelity prototype. And another advantage here the testing will yield more accurate and more applicable result. That's another advantage. But equally, it has some kind of disadvantages also. So disadvantages is of the high fidelity system is it may be a longer or it is costlier to create. The first disadvantage. And another thing here, the users are more likely to comment on the superficial detail than on a context. And another disadvantage after hours of work, you the designer are likely to dislike the idea of the making changes in the sense which can take the considerable time for revising the things. And another disadvantage, users can mistake the prototype for the finished product for and form biases and something. So that's a thing. So that's why some designers split the high fidelity prototyping into the mid fidelity, where the prototyping can have the basics digitally interactively or to be stick that the wireframes or another and high fidelity is nothing but where they are somewhat far closer to the final versions of the product like that. So in that case, it's another thing very important, interactive prototypes. So interactive prototypes that yield for more useful results in the user tests. So that's about the things. So that's why in that case, the low fidelity versus high fidelity prototyping, here the low fidelity prototyping allow the teams to test the information architecture and user flows. That's the overview of the low fidelity prototyping that allow the users to test the information architecture and the user flow. But whereas in the high fidelity prototype that introduce the user interface elements and how the user might interact with the final designs like that. So that's about the low fidelity and high fidelity system. So okay. So next, what are the 8 common methods and best practices? See, that's a very important things to be considered while using the prototyping design. So here they can be never be excessive list of prototyping method. So since that is a quite literally on an endless number of ways you can build the prototype. So in that cases, you will need to pay attention to these some of the 4 key components. So based on that 4 key components, we are making these some 8 common methods. The first method is first common component is the people. Actually, who are all the directly or indirectly related to that prototyping. The first one is the people. The people including those who you are testing and the observers. Second component is an object. So the object is a static and interactive that including the prototype and other object. The people and our prototype interact with them. And the third one is a location. Location is either it may be places or some kind of environment. And fourth one is the interaction. So interaction may be happening through digital or through physical, or it between the people or between the object and between the different locations like that. So these 4 basic components are there. So based on these 4 basic components, we are making the different cases. So in that cases, when you are building your prototype, as well as when you are testing them, keep in your mind these key components. So that's very important. So based on these 4 components only, we are dividing 8 common methods. So that's very important. That's why whenever we go for creating or using that prototype designing, this 4 component should be very important. That's very important. For example, with the users be wearing the gloves or how their hands full or like that. So a lot of so in the use cases, you may go with that these 4 components. So based on these 4 components, we are coming up with that some 8 what are the common methods and best practices. So these 4 components is very important for any kind of what are the prototyping and testing. So no matter what method you choose to utilize for your product like that, so the people, object, location, interaction is very important. So based on that, we are going to see about this some 8 different methods and best practices for the prototyping, designing or development. The first method is the sketches and the diagrams. So we know the sketches is one of the earliest form of prototyping you can use, and it requires a very little effort and does not necessarily depend on the artistic level of drawing skill to prove useful, and therein that lies its value like that. So that's why use the sketches to illustrate your ideas and launch them into the real world. Even the simplest and the crudest of the sketches can easily achieve that. So that's why the sketch is a simple illustration of your concept, so that they don't exist only in your mind. Hence, it allowing you to share these with your team members and for further discussion and ideation like that. So that's another important thing. And another thing, the diagram is nothing but mainly the diagram. You can visualize and analyze the how your ideas can relate with another idea and complement with one another like that. So that's the thing. That's why the dynamic representation is very important. That it's a very useful way to understand the complex situations or any use cases where the many factors and players that affect one another like that. So that's why the sketching is a valuable method of prototyping, because you can do the practically everywhere. But with a paper and pen, or even you use a smartphone, phone or smart tablet or whatever it may be, that's about the sketches and diagram. So this is about the sketches and the diagram. It's a very old type, earliest form of prototyping. And actually, we are using it. And second typing is the paper interfaces. So the paper interfaces here actually, normally whenever we go with the digital products, so any digital product like a mobile app or any websites or any kind of web services, as well as the other screen-based product or experiences that require you to create the range of prototyping methods in the run of the final designs and development. So in that cases, the paper interfaces are the handy at the early stages of the prototyping for the digital product. So in that cases, you can create the paper interfaces by sketching them out, or by the drawing and cutting out the usable parts of a user interfaces and like that. So that's why here the Jacob Nielsen, co-founder of the Nielsen German Group, that explained that the paper prototype are extremely easy and very cheap to produce, while they can provide with many insights that can help you save the money and other things. So that's about the paper interfaces. It's also commonly used method. It's a very handy one. And apart from that, here these are some of the, yeah. Actually, when designing a digital product, you may tempted to create the higher fidelity prototypes directly on a computer or start creating the product right way. But when you can use the paper interfaces, however, you can uncover many areas for improvement, such as some kind of usability issues that can help you make the improvement to your design in the early stages, thus avoiding the production costs and so on. So that's the important thing about the paper interfaces. So that's why, according to the Nielsen, the usability studies show that the early stage changes are about the 100 times cheaper than the changes made in the later stages of product development process like that. So that's about and the third important component is that's nothing but that method is the storyboard. So normally in the storyboard we know about that normal cinematical story like that. So the telling story is an excellent way of we may say guiding the people through a user experience. So here the storyboarding is a technique that derived from the film industry. It's something you can use for the early prototyping to allow yourself to visualize the user's journey and how the users would experience their product or any problem or any development further like that. So when you draw the storyboard, try to imagine the complete user experience and then capture it in a series of images or sketches. So that's it's actually storyboard is like a normal. Actually, the film industry they are all the way they are using the storyboard, but nowadays the storyboard also they can make it in a digital format. So that's entirely different. So that's why the storyboarding is a prototyping method that ensure that we know our users well enough and allow us to keep in mind the context of the solutions we are designing like that. So that's why it's useful for developing empathic understanding of the users and for generating high-level ideation and discussions. So that's it. The storyboard, however, were not very useful for fine-tuning the detail of the product because the drawing tend to more macroscoping in nature. So that's the thing. So that's about this storyboard. And next, fourth component is nothing but it's a Lego prototype. Lego is actually it's a stable of any kids toy box. It's normally we know actually in our the kids are using that. Mainly useful for finding the ability to stimulate the creativity of any kids. So that's a thing. So that's also another kind of prototype. So in that case, it's a versatile and the ability to spark the imagination is what derive the company's success and like that. So the best part of the using the Lego is to build your prototype is that they become easy to dismantle and to trick it. So that's a very important thing. So that's why here, in fact, we may say the Lego actually has taken its toy's ability to simulate the creativity and ideation very seriously for the thing. So that's it. Allow the your team to dive the straight into the setting up your scenarios and telling the stories and like that. So that's about the thing. The fifth one is the actually role playing. So normally the role playing is also another important. We may say the role playing is experimental prototyping. It's a method that allows your design team to explore the scenarios within the system you are what are the targeting physically, and also we can make the best use of the role playing in capturing and expressing the user's emotional experience of using a product and services. So that's why in that cases you can also use it to gain an empathic understanding of your users through the simulating what they are experiencing like that. So that's a very important thing. So that's why the role playing is another very important. So in that cases, whenever we are talking about the role playing, just we have to decide on the role, what some kind of scenes or some storylines beforehand, and possibly combine these methods with storyboarding in order to capture the scenes and the lessons you will learn from each scene like that. So that's about the role playing. And next one is the physical model. So that's the physical model is also actually here. When the end result is a physical product, you can use the wide range of the material to build the mock-ups for testing. So you can use the rough material such as any paper or any cardboard or clay or even in the foam, and you can also repurpose the existing object to find around you in order to build the physical model. So that's why the purpose of the physical model is to bring the intangible idea or a two-dimensional sketch into the physical or three-dimensional plane. So that's why this model allows for the better understanding or better testing with the users, and it can spark discussions about the form factor of the solutions like that. So that's about the physical model. And seventh model is a wizard or the wizard of Oz prototype or wizard model. So in that cases, this prototype are the faked functions. So why? Because, for example, the interactivity that comes from the human rather than the algorithm or software code, that with the users believe that later is the case. So that you can use the what test with your users and like that. So that's the thing. So that's the most common example of the results or the prototype is a prototype of any a digital system here where the user is tricked into the thinking of the system's responses or sometimes it may be a computer driven solution when they are the actually human controlled such as the piece of the virtual system software in which a human are working on another computer types the responses and like that. So that's why here actually that's very important. So in that cases we have to figure out the way of mimicking or faking of the some kind of interactions and other thing. So for example, you can create interactive PowerPoint presentation and use it together with the messages that sent to the computer in order to fake the interactions of a social media website without having any kind of code or anything. So that's about the wizard of the prototyping. And next, the eighth one is a user-driven prototyping. So the user-driven prototyping actually it's a commonly actually it's unlike any other prototyping method it's previously mentioned. So instead of building a prototype to test on users, you will instead of get the users to create something and from the process learn more about the users. So that's why the main purpose of this what is user-driven prototype is not to use the solutions that the users have generated. Instead, it's to use their designs to understand their thinking. So that's why you can use a user-driven prototyping to gain the empathy with your users, or to tune the detail of your product once you have an idea in mind. So that's another very important thing. So that's it for a user interface prototype. To be useful, you should balance the amount of help uh, that you offer the users, so they do not feel the lost their idea or anything else. So that's another kind of thing. So finally, it's eighth method of the user the prototyping. These are the things. And next, which prototype should I build? So that's whenever we are choosing any kind of any idea or any system, which prototype should I build? In the sense here, with such a wide range of prototype you can build, it might be a little overwhelming at times when you and your team have to decide what exactly to build like that. So in that cases, here based on that first one, what's your idea about? So first point, we have to ask the question, what's your idea? In the sense here, we have to, with your team members, note down the key components of your idea, and that all the ideas you have to make it sure. So you have to make it all your ideas, all the key components of your ideas. So in that case, after that, we have to figure out the needs to be tested, and ask the question for each component of your idea that you wish to test or like that. That's the first point. And second one, which questions you want to ask. So the first one, what's your idea about? Second question, which question you want to ask? In the sense here, we have to choose a few questions about the problem, or about the statement, or about the thing, what you answered like that. So for example, in that cases, if you want to test out whether the weight of your prototype is acceptable and usable, and in that cases, I consider building a rough prototype with the same weight as the final product, or like that. So that's that. So what of question we have to ask during the development of that thing, choosing of the prototype. And third question, what prototype makes a sense? So the what prototype makes sense, in the sense here, nothing but for each question, think about the type of the prototype that makes the most sense, and that would most effectively answer the question. So that's the thing. If possible, just hold a brainstorming session with your team members, so that you can generate many alternative possible solutions. Then narrow down the choices through any kind of discussions, or through some kind of what lot of modes are there. What survey, or some kind of discussion, or anything else. So that's a very important. And the next thing, finally, you have to just do it. So the first, you have to ask yourself what's the idea about, which question do you want to ask, and what prototype makes sense. And finally, the design thinking has a bias towards the action. So this means that you should not spend too much time for the deliberating on what to build and how to build it. Just go out with there and start testing and like that. So that's the thing. So that's a very important. So these three questions you have to ask. Then after that, based on that three question and the 11 answer, finally you go with the flow. That's the thing. That's which prototype should I build like that. And next, what about the prototype development? In that cases, actually, we may say the prototype is a lookalike, or a but we may say it's a lookalike or a copy of the part of the demonstrate the product features and explore all the possibility before investing in the parts complete development. So in that case, the prototype can range from a detailed drawing with pen and paper to a fully working version of the product. So therefore the prototype development is simply a series of process that the manufacturer uses to produce a prototype. So many also refer to the prototype development as a prototype manufacturing. That's about the prototype development. And here the different categories of prototype development. The category may be some 4-5 category. So first category is a working prototype. So the category of prototype development. First category is a working prototype. The working prototype is nothing but, its a name implies, the product developer makes the what the working prototype exhibit as many of the final product features and the function as possible. So that's the thing. And second thing is a functional prototype. The functional prototype is and a working prototype are similar in their development process. But however, the product developers usually make the functional prototype on a different scale and using a different techniques. So third one is a visual prototype. Visual prototype is the product developer design the visual prototype to project the what is the shapes, measurement, and outlay the concept of concept what they have for the product like that. And the user experience prototype is nothing but it's the product developer make the user's experience prototype showcase the enough detail that can help the further research in the what the product manufacturer and so on. So what are the importance of prototype development is nothing but here a lot of the importance. The first one for the product pitch. So pitching the product is nothing but here there is no point in making a part of our product which the clients or any stakeholders will not support like that. So that's the thing, and in that cases, it's because they can touch and feel the prototype and give the feedback. Second thing is putting the concept to the test. So here, the putting the concept to the test is nothing but the designing the prototype is a great way to evaluate how the part will perform when the subjected to its working environment. So that's why this test will help the manufacturer to determine the parts of the design to revise and discard unwanted things like that. And the third one is minimizing the cost of the production. So the minimizing the cost of the production, in the sense here, this might seem wrong since the prototype will also consume some of the capital meant for the product production. However, the amount of time used in the prototype production will be insignificant compared to the amount the stakeholders will have to waste if the trial and the error method is used and so on. So, and the prototype development phases is nothing but here we are having the entire different phases. So first the alpha phase, beta phase, pilot phase like that. So the alpha phase is nothing but here it represents the first iteration of the prototype, and it's primarily concerned with answering the two questions. That's alpha version. First one, will the product work? So just we are verifying it. Will the product work or not? How will it look and feel like that? So these two questions. So that's why whenever we're talking about the alpha phase, just here answering these questions usually necessity to separate the prototype. Each one is specifically created to address the basic functionality and user experience respectively. So that's the thing. That's why here based on the alpha phase, we can refer to these first two of the proof of concept and the appearance prototype. So these two things, proof of concept and the appearance prototype, is the early stage of first phase. That's alpha phase. That's a proof. We know about the proof of concept. So the proof of concept is it's a first physical model created along the product roadmap. Is a proof of concept prototype. So in that cases, it's a design to answer the questions. Will it work? It is strictly concerned with the functions one form, and it will likely to bear the little if any resemblance to the final product and so on. So that's the thing. So the functionally representative prototype takes advantages of readily available accessible material to simulate its physical form while employing of the self technology to create its the constant components. So that's why here the proof of concept, the material may be it may be any cardboards. So after seeing the diagram, easily we know about the what about the proof of concept. The proof of concept, the material may include any cardboard, any tape, or any foam, or any wood for representing a physical attribute, and a hardware such as pumps or a motor or heaters to simulate the mechanical the functionality and other things. And even we can use some kind of sensors and the graphic display and so on. So that's about the proof of concept. And next thing is the appearance prototype. So the appearance prototype actually is typically after the confident result in achieved in the proof of concept stage. Next comes with the appearance prototype. So that's why this model answers the question, how will it look and feel, and offer the taste of the final designs like that. So that's why the appearance prototype it's a visually actually representative while lacking the actual functionality. So it's a static model without working factor features, wholly concerned with providing a sense of the look and feel only. So that's about the appearance. That's it's called as appearance prototype. It's only the model only, not about it's a static model only. It's not a really working model like that. So next is the beta phase. So the beta phase is nothing but actually it may call it as a product roadmap. It seeks to refine and improve upon the product design, taking the testing feedback and lessons learned from the earlier versions like that. So that's the thing. So that's why it's mainly based on that iterations and incorporating them as the process inches toward the final product. So this phase mainly based on that two versions. One is the engineering prototype, and another thing is the what is the production prototype. So engineering prototype is a first iteration that maybe that it's called it's mainly based on the visual and functional and manufacturing representative. And second thing is a production prototype. The production prototype is nothing but it's based on the after successfully tested the product, then we'll come up with the product production prototype. That's a beta version of the prototype. And third version is a pilot version. This is a final prototype is really a start of mass production, and it's called as a pilot. So essentially, the first unit to roll up the assembly line like that. So in that, that's about the pilot phase. So based on that pilot phase, here some kind of electronic components and hardware are typically what unchanged the what we may say from the engineering or the production prototype. So, however, the mechanical component materials and some kind of construction material or methods can change significantly. That's the main thing about the pilot phase. That's why the pilot prototype will traditionally be provided to independent testing labs responsible for issuing the product certification and so on. So that's why once these certification have been received, the product has been considered ready for the commercially what is available, and it's for commercial deployment like that. So that's about the thing. So that's the final what is the stage of the prototyping. That's the pilot phase. So the finally, actually, so far we discussed about the different methods, different best practices. What are the methods to be followed while using the prototyping like that? So the when prototyping, pay the attention to these four key components like a people, object, location, and some kind of interaction. These four. So the based on these four only, the eight methods are derived. So these four components is very important. So these factors will affect how your prototype will work and what to observe in the testing sessions like that. So with these factors in mind, you can build your own prototype based on any of the eight methods. So we have seen the four components. Based on the four components, we have discussed the eight methods. So we have it may be like the sketches, paper interfaces, storyboard, prototype, role playing, physical model, or a wizard or a user-driven prototype. So finally, if you are unsure what prototype to build in the sense, you can use that idea as the four-step process to help you the start making of the prototyping like that. So that's why the prototype development of any part of the product is it may be called it as a part of the process that requires a lot of planning and careful deliberation is needed. While you can choose any do it yourself, you can seek the expert's help, which makes the work somewhat easier and also saving the timing and other things. So with the short note, actually, just I conclude my session. So actually, so far we discussed these are the things like four component. Based on that four component, eight methods. So based on that eight method, we are going to choose which one is better for our problem or our statement. So that's the thing. So finally, we have to conclude which one is better for our problem or our solutions like that. So thank you so much. Thank you. So any queries?
Uh, we have seen some prototyping software like Sketch in your PPT. So, can you share any prototype if you have it in right now for knowing the designs that is done by software?
Finding out?
software. Using software, you have created prototypes, right? So
Ah,
using some, and you have given some examples.